Hi everyone. So I usually start all my talks or workshops by asking who's heard of GSAP, but like, I don't think we need to do that today. So I asked before everyone was in here, but just we'll do this again. Who is comfortable with GSAP or JavaScript? Okay, you are my helpers. So if anyone is new to code and you type in the wrong thing or your code isn't running or you're confused, just put your hand up and then either I'll come and help you or one of the other people that is comfortable with JavaScript will come and help you. Don't feel shy. I don't want people to get stuck and lost and left behind. So we'll do a little quick run through for anyone that doesn't know what GSAP is. It's an animation library built for the web that allows you to animate anything that JavaScript can touch. So this is really exciting because you might have used CSS animations before. CSS can animate properties of DOM elements. So we're talking HTML elements or SVG elements. With JavaScript, you can animate anything that JavaScript can get to. So that's like 3D stuff, canvas, in Webflow world, like spline, Lottie, pretty much any property of anything that you can access with JavaScript. It's the industry standard for web animation. I checked some stats recently, and it's been used on over 12 million websites, which is quite a lot for a team of 3. And there's almost 4 million websites live currently using GSAP. I mentioned in the keynote yesterday, there's a really big overlap between the Webflow community and the GSAP community, especially if you look at the sort of sites that end up on awards or CSS design awards. So out of all the Webflow sites that we found on awards, 78% of them use GSAP. So that's like, it's a good little combo. There's some really talented interaction designers and creative developers. Is Ilya in here? I would just get to embarrass him without him being in the room. That's good. So a lot of these creative developers are using Webflow for their build and then kind of sprinkling a little bit of GSAP on top with code. And I found this initially a little bit confusing when I saw all of the Webflow sites pouring into the GSAP showcase. But it kind of makes sense because it compresses down the design and development time, Webflow, that is. So there was kind of more time left at the end of these agency budgets to get these really, really talented creative developers on board to kind of do some GSAP stuff right at the end. So yeah, I'm just really excited about the opportunity to like bring that to more people because right now it's kind of just the people who are happy to get stuck in with some code. Here are some examples of some things made last year using GSAP to give you a little bit of inspiration and give my voice a break. Is the off-brand team in here? Yeah. This is way longer than I remember it being. Hey. So yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit. You're late. You were up on the screen a few minutes ago. I hope this gives you a little bit of inspiration about what sort of things you can build with GSAP. It's all probably very inspiring and exciting, but maybe also a little bit scary that you can build that sort of thing with code. Like, coding animation sounds super hard, and I know that as someone that comes from a design and motion graphics background. I kind of got into coding back in the day of banner ads. I was making video banner ads, and my boss promised to a client that we could deliver the same animation that I'd built with video for some HTML banner ads. And that was before GSAP was allowed on all the banner ad networks, so I had to recreate it with CSS. It was like thousands of lines of CSS. It was horrible. But yeah, then I discovered GSAP, and I realized how easy coding animation can actually be. So lots of people in our community learn JavaScript by learning GSAP first. It's kind of like a good little entryway into code. So here's a little bit of GSAP code to ease you in. There's loads of stuff that you can do with GSAP, but the two kind of core things to know are tweens and timelines. And tweens are like the powerhouse of GSAP. They're how you animate things. So this is what does all the animation work. Just a little bit of JavaScript code. You've got a method. This is a toTween. So this is saying animate to some values. And then you've got some targets. I think in Webflow world, you'll use attributes for the targets, but we've got a little class added in here. And then you've got the variables block, so you can kind of add whatever you want to animate inside that variables block. And there's also some special properties as well, like duration and ease and repeats and delays and all of that sort of thing. So this is saying, hey, GSAP, I would like to animate the element with a class of box to 200 pixels to the right. Nice and simple. Then we have timelines. So if you've done animation in like After Effects or some sort of animation program, you're probably used to timelines. In GSAP, you can arrange tweens on timelines to kind of create a sequence of animations. So timelines are really, really flexible. You can basically pop tweens wherever you want on timelines. You can also nest timelines. So you could create a whole bunch of different timelines and nest them all on a master timeline, which is very handy when you're trying to organize animations. So this is the default, which is just we've added some tweens. They're all sequenced one after another. But we've got a thing called the position parameter. And the position parameter allows you to place tweens wherever you want on a timeline. All right, so it's enough talking. That was a little brief run through. I have made a little site for you folks. Lives at gsap.com/playtime. Cool, so if you've got the GSAP Playtime site open on your laptop, then you'll have all the code snippets that you need are there. So I don't want you to just be having to watch me typing things and like trying to work out where all the dots go and stuff. Like all the little snippets that you need are there. I would encourage you to not just copy the snippets, but like change the values. And don't just change the values to stuff that you're like, oh, this will definitely work. Like actively try and break things because it's a really fun way to learn. The worst that will happen is the code stops running and I come and help you. The best that can happen is something will just do something really wild and unexpected, which is always great. We've got this little page. This will stay up for a few months so that anyone that doesn't get to play around today can have a little play around at home. Who's used CodePen before? Yeah, awesome. I'm going to just show you how to use CodePen. So this is our little thing that we're going to be animating today. You might recognize it from the GSAP site. Right, so CodePen's a really useful like little prototyping environment. So you can write code and then immediately see the results in the browser. So I often recommend to people if they're building in Webflow, like CodePen's a really good place to start with like prototyping and animation. Like get it working in CodePen, tinker with it in CodePen. When you're happy with the code, you can move it into Webflow. Obviously in the future, hopefully we'll make that a little bit easier. This is the default view that it gives you, which I absolutely hate. It's like the code right at the top and then the bit down at the bottom. So if you've got the default view, if you go to this settings panel here, you can change the layout so that you've got your code on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, depending on what you like. Is everyone happy with the CodePen setup? Yes. Okay, cool. So here's a little tween. This is from tween. So in this, we're saying animate from these parameters. So we've got like a scale. Let's make this a different number just to run the code again. So that's animating from a scale of 0 and spinning the little windmill around. In the GSAP playtime doc, I've got these little tween snippets for you. I've also told you what you can animate so that you don't actually have to go into the HTML and dig around, because that's a little bit too much hard work for the second day of a conference. So all of these things exist in the code, and you can just grab hold of them and do something silly with them. So let's do a little stagger. Staggers are really fun. Staggers are a thing that everyone says that they want in Webflow, right? That's a thing that we've got in GSAP. Very difficult to do if you have to select each individual thing. So in GSAP world, we can animate things in a staggered sequence just by adding one line of code. So I'll do that a little bit slower so you can see. This is targeting all the letters. And it's saying add a stagger of 0.1 seconds. So just with like one line of code, you can say stagger all of these elements. It gets really fun when you customize it a little bit. So GSAP kind of allows you to do things simply, but we also provide kind of extra functionality if you want to dig in. So instead of just saying stagger 0.1, we could say each 0.1, which says the same thing. But you see how it's starting from the beginning here. If we wanted to stagger from the end instead, we can provide that as a parameter. If you wanted to animate from the center, you could provide that as a parameter. I really love randomness in animation. It makes things feel a little bit more human and unpredictable and interesting. So you could do that sort of thing, animate from a random value. We've also got utilities. So there are kind of certain things like mapping ranges or randomness or distributing values that are quite complicated to do maths-wise, but we've kind of baked them into GSAP. So for instance, if we wanted to say, like right now, everything is animating in from the bottom, right? We can say animate in from either the top or the bottom. So that's passing in an array. Is it big enough? I can make it bigger. Is that better? Yeah. So that's passing in an array into the random function, and that's saying either animate in from the top or from the bottom. Y% is a really handy one because the Y values are based on the actual height of the element that you're animating. So if you don't know how many pixels you want something to move, but you want it relative to the element itself, it's a really handy thing to use. We can also, rather than passing in an array like that, we can pass in, oh wait, let's do a little spin. We'll do a spin. Rotation. So we can say a value between minus 360, a whole spin, and 360, which is a whole spin in the other direction, and then get something like that, which is really fun. There's also loads and loads of easings. So that's a really fun thing to play around with. We've got an ease visualizer on the GSAP site that shows you all the different types of easing that you can use. Who's used CSS easers before? Cool. So CSS easers, if you look at the graph, they're cubic Bezier curves. So you've got two handles, very much like this, and you can stretch these handles out. And depending on where you stretch the handles, that gives you the easing curve. And the ease determines how fast the animation plays at a different point during the progress of an animation. With GSAP's easings, we actually use SVG path data. So for instance, if we look at this elastic ease, which can be customized with like additional values. Right, let's get a good one. Yeah, so if we take a look at that in terms of data, there's so many points. So I'm just showing you this to show that like GSAP easing is like incredibly flexible. And we've got a plugin called Custom Ease, which you can actually use yourself to create any ease that you can think up. So if this is going to be a really silly one, but if we pop this one in, and give that a go, it will be really, really bouncy. A less bonkers one is like back dot out. It gives a like nice little bounce at the end. I always think of back eases as a little bit like Looney Tunes eases. You know, when there's like the cartoon characters like about to run off somewhere, and they always do like a woo before they run off. It's kind of a similar thing. So yeah, that's a stagger animation. So all of that is just one tween, which is really cool. Like, it's just one little bit of JavaScript code. I'm going to make the code a little bit smaller. What else should we animate? Someone shout out a thing that they can see on the screen. Lightning. All right, so we're going to go, what do you want to do to the lightning? Scale in from the top right. Like it's stabbing. All right. So we want to go, let's use X% so we can, %. Let's do, I did that wrong, so I did a 2 tween, and we wanted to animate from those values, not to those values. So there we go, that's coming in. Let's make that a little bit longer so you can see it. Awesome. So we've got 2 tweens now. Has anyone else got more than one tween in their play pen, whatever we're calling it? Code pen, that's the one. Who's got one tween working? Yeah, who's got more than one tween working? All right, who's completely stuck and needs help? Awesome, that's really good. Okay, so if you've got more than one tween working, let's get another one added in. We'll do this little windmill. I think it's a windmill. It should move. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's make this one do a little rotation. Let's do like 800. And we'll make it scale in from 0. So awesome, we've got a few things working. Let's add this little circle as well. We'll do a 2 tween. So yeah, we've got a whole bunch of different tweens now, but you can see that they're all happening at the same time. And now what most people do when they start learning GSAP is you can add delays into tweens. So people add delays. They'll be like, oh, I want this one to happen afterwards. So I'll add a delay of like 2 seconds. The thing with that is like that's how CSS animations work. They don't have any relationship to each other. And if you add a delay on one of your tweens of 2 seconds because you want it to happen after another one ends, and then you change the duration of the first one, then you've got to go into all of your tweens and you've got to change all the delays and you've got to change all the durations, and it all gets very hard to maintain. So what we've got with GSAP is timelines. And all you do to make a timeline is you just add this little line here. So this is saying, hey, GSAP, I want a timeline. And a timeline itself doesn't have any time. It doesn't have anything really other than the concept of a container. Like it's a way to collect all of your animations. And in order to add all of these to the timeline, all you have to do is go through and change all of your GSAP references to timeline. And then all of these will happen sequenced on the timeline, one after another. So you can see the windmill plays, then all of our letters come in, then we've got our lightning bolt, and then the little circle spins around. So that's now like all on a timeline. I've added this little thing as well. We've got a little debugger, which you can add into your prototypes. And then you can scrub through as well. It's very handy for debugging. So I mean, hopefully in integration land, without promising anything too much, there should be some sort of setup like this that allows you to kind of scrub through, like skip to different parts of your animation, like slow it down. All of those concepts already already exist in GSAP. You can play animations through at different speeds. You can skip to certain points of animations. You can play them in reverse. You can even use GSAP to animate the time of an animation, which is getting very meta, but yeah. So that's a like little debugging thing. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
The timeline thing, how can those elements overlap? Let's say you want the second one to start like...
Really good question. Awesome. So that's the position parameter. And position parameter is like super, super flexible. So for instance, we could say animate the windmill, and then we'll add a position parameter in that says wait 2 seconds and then animate the letters. So the windmill will go, and then there'll be 2 seconds, and then all the letters go.
Do you do like minus if you want the letters to... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we could do minus equals 0.5. Let's do that because I think the first one's like a second. We'll do -1 because it's 2 seconds long. So this should start halfway through the first one. Yeah. And there's loads of different position parameters. The docs are like, they're my baby. And I try really hard to make the language in them like human readable. They're full of demos that you can just fork. They're full of examples that you can play with. Docs tend to be really hard in developer land. The number of times that I sat staring at docs and regretting all my life choices. So I don't want the GSAP docs to be that. And I think a lot of people, when they're learning GSAP for the first time, they'll be like, where are the tutorials? I want to watch like a YouTube thing. And they're scared of just getting stuck in. But we've got like a getting started guide. It's got all the little code pens you need. It's got all of the examples. Everything's like human readable. If it's not, then shout at me on the internet and I will make it more understandable. But yeah, the position parameters. Here you can see this is direct sequence. Whoop. So they're playing like one after another. This one's got a gap, so plus equals 1 second. And then here we've got an overlap. You can also use absolute times as well. So if you want a tween to start at exactly 2 seconds in or exactly 1 second in, you can do that. We've also got labels. So labels are really cool for if you've got a lot of things that you want to happen at the same time. A good example is if you think of like a firework, you've got like, that goes up in the air and then like loads of stuff happens. So you could add a label that's called bang and then make everything happen at the bang label. And the handy thing with labels is that you can change the position of the label as well. So this has added a label at 1 second after the green one, but you could change the position of the label and all of the tweens that you've added to that label will just come along with that. So yeah, loads of different ways. Percentage-based position parameters as well. Occasionally people are like, oh, I want to do this with a position parameter, and then we add another position parameter, so there's a lot of them. A handy one, actually, is pointer. I think you could probably just get away with the plus equals and minus equals and the pointer. The pointer is basically saying start this one at the same time as the previous one. So it's like a little arrow pointing to the previous animation, if that makes sense. Cool. I'm going to do a little bonus messing around with a GSAP plugin, I think, as well. So GSAP has the concept of plugins. Where's my sidebar gone? Oh, here we go. I wasn't even on the docs. There it is. So the core GSAP library basically has everything that you need to do animations. All the stuff that we've covered so far is in the main GSAP library. But we've also got plugins that allow you to do different things. Scroll trigger's one that is like very, very popular. I think that the biggest mistake I see with people that are learning scroll trigger is that they try and learn scroll trigger before they've learned GSAP. And actually the simplest way to use scroll trigger is to use a GSAP timeline, create your whole animation without scroll trigger, just as a GSAP timeline, and then all you have to do is just add a scroll trigger to it. That's the simplest way. And I see so many people who don't have an understanding of timelines like battling with scroll trigger because they're thinking in terms of like positions on the page and scroll distance and stuff. Don't need to worry about any of that. You can just create a timeline that does what you want and then just hook it up to scroll. Sorted. This is how easy it can be to hook something up to scroll. You can also make it a little bit more detailed, like we did with staggers. But yeah, let's do a little draw SVG animation for fun. I love SVG. SVG is one of my favorites. So here in the HTML, these are all of our letters, but we've also got the images that we've been animating. And then the lightning bolt is just an SVG. So I've set this up already so it's got a stroke around the outside and then like a little masked rectangle fill on the inside. So we can, let's get rid of this actually so you can see it. Whoop. Surprised that no one needs help. You're all either very clever or very shy. I'm not sure which one it is. So yeah, that's draw SVG. So it's drawing in that little path there. I'll do that again in slow motion. Yeah, draw SVG is a lot of fun. I've seen a lot of people create SVGs that have like a whole path that goes down their whole website and then tied that to scroll. And when you scroll down, it kind of reveals things and stuff. That's a really fun way to use it. I'm just going to copy paste this because second day of conference. So we've got a little mask in this one now as well. So yeah, if we run through. Go on. Oh, I hit it. So yeah, drawing the outside stroke and then filling it up is quite fun. So those snippets are in the page as well if you want to have a little play around with that. Yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot of things. I tried to go quite fast because I think that there will be questions and it will be nice to have a little wander around and see what people have made. If you've made something that you like and want to show it off, then we can do that as well, but I'm not going to pressure anyone. Cool. Is there anything anyone wants to ask or anything else they'd like to see? Yeah.
I have a specific question about scroll trigger that kind of came up in the last days. So imagine there's like a page and like between the first few sections you want, and the first few sections basically can't view it. So between those you want a scroll trigger. So when I scroll down, it jumps to the second and the third, kind of like that. After that it's a normal scroll. How would you do that? Okay,
so there's two answers to this. My first answer is from an accessibility and usability standpoint, don't do this. It's a thing that everybody seems to want to do. And actually, it kind of comes from like a little bit of a misunderstanding of what scroll trigger is. So there's two different tools that we've got and ways that people use them on the web. And like the first one is scroll trigger. Let's get some demos. Okay. So here's an example. So scroll trigger, there's like a scroll bar. You can pin stuff, but like it's all controlled by the user scroll. So you're firing off animations at a certain scroll distance, and it's like much more accessible. The user's in control of what's going on. And then there's event-driven effects. And event-driven effects can sometimes be driven by scroll or scroll events. And this is what we have Observer that does stuff like this. It's hard to demo, but I'm just going to like touch the... Okay, so what's happening here is that there's actually no scroll. There's no scroll bar. This is very jazzy, and people see this on awards, and they're like, oh, I want to do that. I would caution people not to do this unless you've got a really good understanding of JavaScript and how browsers work. Because basically what this is doing is it's completely hijacking the user's scroll. It's layering loads of elements right on top of each other, and then you're responding to events and dictating exactly what happens. So you're taking all of the browser functionality away, and you're going, no, you're going to have my experience that I've developed. If you haven't developed it properly, hello Safari, hello old phones, there's going to be problems. And I think you can do this kind of thing if you're very confident with your skills. And also I would recommend providing like a fallback with prefers reduced motion so that if someone doesn't want this, they can just scroll down the page like normal. But yeah, be careful. You can do this. I have actually got a code pen that I put together, and it is titled the Deeply Cursed Scroll Trigger and Observer Demo, because so many people ask that question, and it is how to do a mixture of the two. And what you basically do is you have like a normal scrolling page, you have scroll triggered animations. When you hit a certain point, you go, nope, I'm taking away all the control from you. You take over everything with JavaScript. And then once they've got to the end of the bit that you want to control, you give them the control back. It is very buggy, and it works in some browsers sometimes. And there are, Ilya's looking like it's hard. Yeah, so my answer would be if you have a client that wants to do that, tell them that you can't and do something different instead. Yeah. Oh, if you need me to tell the designers, like you can just send them to me and I'll give them a little slap on the hand through the screen. Awesome. Yeah, usually saying no because of accessibility works. Sorry, I didn't mean to lecture everybody. Another question?
What's the equivalent to spring animation in GSAP? Like, there's not such like spring specific.
No, so we have
What's the way to?
we have elastic easing, so that kind of creates a springy type animation. The reason we don't have a spring animation is because spring animations are not restrained by time. They're restrained by like how far you want them to go and momentum and stuff. They're more physics-based. And that doesn't really work very well with a timeline-based system where you want to queue up animations one after another. It can be very difficult to kind of add a spring animation into a timeline. We've thought about adding a spring animation like as a kind of standalone transition ease, but you can't really guarantee that people are just going to use it in a standalone way. So usually the animation libraries that have springs don't have a concept of timelines. That's something that you'll usually notice. We have, where are my docs? We've got some like physics-y plugins as well. We've got physics 2D and physics props, and physics props kind of gives you some of the springy type things. Let's see if I can find a demo. Demos. Oh wait, actually, this one, right on our profile in the header. Yeah, that's using our physics plugin. So you've kind of got the concept of like gravity and momentum and that kind of thing. I don't know how to open that now. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you considered of splitting the main library into more granular control modules?
It's funny because you can tell how long people have been using GSAP by that question. It used to be. It used to be like tween nano, tween light, tween max. And what happened was that people were kind of using tween light or tween nano and getting frustrated when they couldn't do like basic GSAP things. And so they were like frustrated and then felt like they had to use the bigger library and like it was a bad thing. So people were always trying to use the smaller one and then getting really frustrated and then using the larger one and then kind of complaining about it. And it wasn't, yeah. And it was also very hard to educate people because people would load the smaller library and then they'd use some GSAP code that they found online and then it wouldn't work and they wouldn't know why. So the way that we've kind of done things is by splitting all the plugins out, and we have in the core what we deem to be the most important things for animation. So, yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Do you guys have any solid recommendations on how to organize the code? Because as a website grows, like it's just streams of code to get all the animations working. Do you have any recommendations or can point to any recommended way of organizing?
Yeah, actually. I think this demo, I put this one together in one of my SVG workshops to show it's kind of on the more complicated side. But yeah, I usually do all of the set tweens at the top. So that's kind of like setting all of your defaults and transform origins and stuff. And then you'll see I've got like individual functions that have timelines. And they all return a timeline at the end. So you could put these, you can tuck these away, basically. Each of these is like the individual bits of this overall timeline. And then at the bottom, there's like a master timeline with all of the sub-timelines nested on it. So that's quite tidy because you can just tuck everything away in functions. If I run this, I think you can see. Yeah, so like the S function is like the first timeline. And then, yeah, the V and the G and the burst and all of those are in their separate separate pieces. I would say that there's nothing really wrong with having lots of JavaScript. As a developer who's worked on code bases that have a lot of JavaScript, that's just a lot of JavaScript on the web. I don't really know how you organize code in Webflow. I've seen people use Slater, but yeah, I don't really know about Webflow in particular. In my world, we kind of put JavaScript in its own components. I think you can do that. Can you do that in Webflow? Like JavaScript linked to components? Yeah. So maybe, yeah, that might be a good way to organize it. Again.
Are we ever going to see you using Webflow? Are we ever going to see you use Webflow?
I'm going to learn Webflow in public and look really stupid while I'm doing so. It's going to be great. Aaron's going to teach me, hey, and I'm going to teach Aaron. So if you want to, yeah, he's going to learn GSAP, and I'll learn Webflow, and we'll hopefully build something that works-ish together. But yeah, if anyone has done Webflow courses or wants to swap tips in exchange for GSAP tips, I'm up for that as well. Any more questions? Yes.
Are there inaccessibility, don't laugh?
It's a really good question.
When using GSAP?
So someone asked me this question at the party last night, and it's such a broad question. Like people, often like stakeholders or like project people or I don't know, people that don't understand code will be like, no, we can't have animation because of accessibility, and that's kind of like saying we can't have color because of accessibility. Like you obviously, when using color on your website, you could choose to make the background of your website white, and you could choose to make all of your text white, and that would be incredibly inaccessible. No one would be able to see anything. But you're not going to do that. In the same way with animation, you could make every single word on your website spin around in circles infinitely, and that would be really bad. So it's about making intelligent choices, and I think most people know what those intelligent choices are. There are a few things that can help. Some personal advice from like a UX standpoint is it's really easy to just get excited by the fact that you've learned how to animate and then want to animate everything. And everybody's seen those sites that like you scroll down and every single bit of text fades in from the side. And like if say you want to go to a restaurant and you're just looking for the address of the restaurant and you're scrolling down your phone and all of the text is like fading in really slowly from the sides, it's just incredibly frustrating. It's not bringing any kind of like elevation to the design whatsoever. So I think the first thing is to like look at your site and be like, is this animation actually helping? Is it like bringing something? And if not, then just bin it. And then in terms of other accessibility, text is a little bit of a tricky one. So you'll see here we've got a heading that's split up into individual letters. And screen readers can't read that. They'll read out each individual letter. So we've got an ARIA hidden label here. And then we've got an ARIA label letting the screen reader know what text is there. There's a few different ways to handle this. We've actually got planned in the next GSAP update, we want to kind of do this automatically for people. Whatever we build into Webflow will make sure that it is accessible for screen readers and stuff. That's the nice thing about like a visual interface is we can kind of put guardrails in place and stop people from making mistakes. Another thing that we've got is prefers reduced motion capabilities. So accessible animations, there we go. This was on my my list when I started working at GSAP. I think one of the first things I said to Jack was we needed to add this. So people can add they can choose reduced motion preferences on their machine. So there we go. Here you can see a reduced motion toggle. So if people have a sensitivity to motion, they can toggle that. I sometimes toggle this when I'm testing things and then I forget about it and then I think all my websites are broken, which is always super fun. But yeah, you can see here that it's just got like a little scale. If we get rid of this reduce motion setting and we do this again, we're going to run it again. Yeah, now it's got a spin as well. So with GSAP, you can do that quite nice and easy. This is a little bit more complicated, that demo, actually. But yeah, you just basically like wrap your code in an object that looks for reduced motion, and then you can provide a fallback, or you can just say don't animate. So yeah, it's very possible. I wrote an article, animation. Yeah, I wrote an article on CSS tricks ages ago about animation accessibility, and it's got like a whole bunch of examples and yeah, resources and links to Nielsen Norman Group do loads of really good research, like UX research about it. So, yeah.
Is auto alpha, because I was trying to figure it out, so
Auto alpha, yeah.
is it okay, like, if you get with JavaScript? Obviously, if you have the thing showing, auto alpha is not working, it's loading afterwards, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Depends on how you're using it. I do see a lot of people trying to avoid the Flash, like first rendering Flash by hiding everything in their CSS and then animating it in with JavaScript. And obviously, if JavaScript fails, then your whole website is going to be hidden for people. So I think I wrote this section on the GSAP docs and recommend using a no script tag. So there's a demo in here. You basically no script tags run. They sit in the I think the head of your document. Maybe you can put them wherever. But they like just a web platform thing that if you don't have any JavaScript for some reason, like if you're on the train and your signal dies, the whatever's in the no script tag will run. So you can use the no script tag to show your page again, just in case. So it's like a good little fallback. So good questions. I think we've got like 2.5 minutes. Does anyone want to show what they worked on? Is anyone happy with their animation? Everyone hates their animation. That's so sad. Anyone? Yeah, let's do it.
It's not as ugly as I would like.
Oh, you went brutalist. Excellent.
We want a screen share.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
That's excellent. Who needs aesthetics when you can horrify everyone? Will you see it? It's exactly what I meant by break everything. It's great. Excellent. Does anyone else want to show off what they worked on? Everyone's too shy. That's okay. We're allowed to be shy. I think one more person had a hand up for a question. Good. Yeah?
Big fun. I was wondering, can you animate GSAP like pixels on an image or a canvas element or video?
Yeah, you can. That's a little bit more involved. You'd have to kind of use Canvas for that. I would recommend Pixie is a really good place to start. Fun. Yeah, so Pixie is like a 2D. I was just giggling at something by myself. That's great. I'll show you what I was giggling at. I was giggling at the little worm. It's great. Yeah, Pixie is a like 2D rendering library, and it's actually like really, it's a lot simpler than Canvas. Like Canvas is quite brutal to learn, like the actual web API. It's fun, but like quite involved, whereas Pixie kind of makes it a little bit easier, and you can animate Pixie objects with GSAP. We've actually got a Pixie plugin as well. Pixie plugin just makes it even easier to animate with Pixie. So if you're kind of new to Canvas stuff, that's like a good entry point, like Pixie and GSAP's Pixie plugin. And you can do like interesting stuff with images. There's also, what's Martin Laxon's library? Curtains, yeah, thank you. You always have my back. Curtains is it's like a little library that allows you to do shadery things to images. So there might be something in there for kind of pixel manipulation. Cool. Wrapping it up. Thank you very much.